Hello, everyone, and welcome to In Time. My name is Nicholas Lamar Soutter. With me today is Cheshire Vic. Cheshire, how are you?
I'm great. How are you?
Doing well, thanks. A little tired, but doing doing well.
I
Courtney
know that feeling.
Stewart. Courtney Stewart was unable to make it today. We also, unfortunately, were unable to do Stitch in Time with Mikey today. He should be available next week for the regular Thursday show. Thank you all for joining us. As usual, we have decided to forego the usual uh, uh, breaking news unless there's something really extraordinary happening. We almost went breaking when the UK went on lockdown, but we were expecting that. So um, we are moving forward with
We're gonna have to
just
start
unfortunate.
changing it from breaking to surprising.
Yes. Or mildly just like, okay, this is what happened today news. Um, Yeah, this has kind of changed our procedures a little bit, but we're trying to keep up. We have some interesting developments on stuff we had covered yesterday, and so let's begin because there's a good deal of stuff to cover. The UK did go into lockdown this morning, and they are. It looks like going to be shutting down the subway system. I don't know if they've actually proceeded with that part of it, but they're going to be basically closing most mass transit, if not all mass transit, and going into lockdown. Minnesota and Vermont have classified grocery clerks as emergency workers. Texas has banned all gatherings of 10 people or more and closed restaurants, bars, and gyms. This is a somewhat more aggressive move. Texas has been a little late to this, but they are now acting quite a bit more aggressively than a number of other states. Um, the U.S. has begun releasing prisoners out of jail. The Los Angeles County Sheriff's Department has reduced its inmate population by 600 people in the last 2 weeks. They're
Wow.
doing so in an effort to, yes, and that is simply the Los Angeles County Sheriff's Department. They are doing this because we had Courtney Stewart, our host, our regular co-host, had suggested that this would obviously be a problem. They are vulnerable in prison. They are in close quarters. You can't keep them in solitary confinement, which is the only way to them the whole time. And there are people who are, in fact, in prison who are unusually vulnerable, immunocompromised, any of those other issues. The ones they're releasing are not the violent prisoners, but they are making every effort to release anybody that does not have to be in jail at this time, even victims
So they're
or have
releasing
out their
everybody who
sentence.
smokes weed.
A bit more aggressively than that. To tell you the truth, I would not be surprised if at this point Weinstein does not qualify for release because while it is rather serious what he is, at this point, if I have no idea, they're getting pretty aggressive about letting people out of jail.
Right.
Oh, this just gets better every time we come on. Aren't you glad you're here?
I mean, if I was
Uh,
gonna be here at any time, it would be in time for
oh
this.
God. Okay. Yeah. We actually started on time, which is wow. It's the apocalypse. I know. St. Patrick's Day
The time
and
has come.
all the pubs. Yep. All right. 1/3 of California is now under orders to shelter in place. Oil prices have dropped to their lowest point in 20 years, and this week saw 70,000 new unemployment claims. 70,000 unemployment
Jesus.
claims.
Oh wow. I think that's definitely telling though that they've decided grocery clerks are emergency service. I think it is really telling the people like who actually should be making the most amount of money in the country when you start having to shut things down and see who you actually need to run because realistically what we should learn from this is maybe adjust the pay of the people anybody who's had to do like who's been required to continue working should have their pay at minimum doubled
Well,
in
that's good. Oh,
perpetuity.
yes, in perpetuity. Nice that you found a way to work that in there. I think well, at a minimum, I think they should be getting some form of hazard pay, and their families are home. A lot of these people also, their kids are home. You can't get a babysitter right now, so if your kids are home and you are now under, and we've talked about this, the states that have uh, uh, with President Trump's new declaration, which was actually a war power act, and with his new declaration, he can force people to work, and especially anybody who is declared a emergency worker. So he can legally require people to work. He can require them to take overtime. He can require just about anything of them and any corporation which is deemed necessary for production in this country. So my guess is that's the first step in that process. And I mean, the good news is we talked about this yesterday. The food chain is probably going to remain completely intact, which is why panic is not necessarily a good idea. Everybody is at a minimum nervous, if not scared, but the
Well,
country's
they might have
infrastructure
to.
is, yeah.
Yeah, they might have to extend that, right? It shouldn't just necessarily be grocery clerks. It's going to have to be anybody working in food, warehousing, and stuff like that. And
Yep,
hazard pay is a
we
good point, yeah.
I think they should get hazard pay at a minimum of some kind, at least overtime, whatever a normal overtime pay would be. We've spoken with a couple of different drivers and had a letter yesterday from a trucking company, which was an exemption to most of the protections offered to truck workers. Well, protections depends on who you ask. Truck workers don't appreciate all those protections anyway, but allowing truck workers to significantly overload their vehicles, allowing them to exceed the work times without a break, allowing them to go with sleep, and so on and so forth. All of those protections are being rolled back for obvious reasons. At this point,
They're making
originally,
concessions, yeah.
yeah. At this point, originally the thinking was that this would only be a couple of weeks. Now we are extending to thinking that many of these could go through the summer, and that a number of schools have in fact already decided. States, sorry, have closed their schools for the entire school year, on the assumption that this is going to have at least several different waves, and we will not be functioning in a normal day-to-day capacity for at least 2 to 3 months. The good
That's a
news,
lot.
yep, yep. The good news: Florida's beaches are full.
I saw a picture of that. Oh no.
Yep, Florida's beaches are full, maybe a little. They're pretty full. There's a lot of people enjoying Florida's nice beaches. The state of Florida has already undergone a number of these emergency rollbacks. They're being ignored by spring breakers. A large number of spring breakers have decided that they're going to continue with their spring break and have been going to Florida and partying and doing the sort of normal, regular spring break activities. This coincides with a new discovery in China, the US, and Italy that, contrary to popular opinion, the youth are not as resistant to coronavirus as once thought. And they, in fact, have been having a larger number of them getting stuck on ventilators and dying than had been previously reported. Originally, it was thought that if you're under 30, the mortality rate is about 0.125%. It's now thought that it's actually significantly higher. So, yeah, I think there's some problems there.
A couple.
Yeah, Colorado has expanded its lockdown. The U.S. cases are up 40% and now exceed
Wow.
10,000 cases of coronavirus. Globally, there are 220,000 cases confirmed and over 8,800 deaths. Italy's death toll is now up over 3,405, which is in excess of China's death toll. That's important. That's important, and that's a
That's
number I would
huge.
like everyone to think about. That is huge, but that's actually huge for a reason most people don't consider. Italy just exceeded China's death toll. It's a smaller country, and it
Yeah.
started this later. It started this
And with less
later.
people.
Why? Yeah. So why are they exceeding the death toll? The reason is because China correctly responded to this. China has, for the first time ever, reported no new cases locally where the infections happened locally in the country. Not one new case. There are people who have been worried and said, Jesus, how can we fight this? Can it be fought? Yes, it can. That's why we're doing these procedures, and that's why these procedures are so important. China does have one advantage, which is it's a utilitarian government. When they can sit there and say, okay, if you go outside, Done. We're going to shoot and kill you. They can say that, and that does make it a lot easier for them to quarantine their people. Nonetheless, they have now conclusively proven that these steps work. Whether or not they can be done as
The
effectively
isolation, yeah.
in, yeah, that's a so this works, and the Boris Johnson administration, which Noel Plum and I got into a little thing about because I was criticizing them heavily, but it would appear that if you act quickly enough, you can prevent ending up like Italy. There's some question as to whether or not we have succeeded in that, and it looks like the UK may have moved a little late on it and may fail. But Italy is unfortunately still under a complete lockdown and completely overwhelmed. We showed yesterday, and there's now today even more images of military trucks carrying off the bodies. They simply can't. There's no place to bury them. There's too many people dying too rapidly. They can't handle them, so the military is taking them for cremation. In New York, the total number of confirmed infections is now 4,152. In Washington, it's 1,100. California, it's almost 900. New Jersey, it's almost 800. 422 in Illinois, and 384 in Florida, where spring break is going on in full swing. In addition, Representative Ben McAdams has joined 28 members of Congress who are now in self-quarantine because they have come into contact with people who have coronavirus. There are now 2 members of Congress who have tested positive for coronavirus. I still think the president has it. I could be wrong. I don't actually have any evidence that he's got it, but I don't believe the test that says he's negative, that's for sure.
Mm. There's I've seen some people questioning the numbers in America just because they don't think the number of people who should be going to get tested are even going to get tested for various reasons. Some of them being money, some of them being not being able to find a place with proper testing equipment, et cetera, et cetera. So people think that there's an argument to be made that the numbers that they're reporting in America are actually significantly lower than the number that actually have it.
I think that's likely. Unfortunately, that's a very good point. I think that's probably true. The U.S. is behind every other country in testing, and I've got called out on this. When I say every other country, I mean every other industrialized country that's going through this right now. We are behind, and that's irrefutable. And I do know people personally who are presumptive positives who haven't bothered with the test because, quite frankly, at this point, in order to get the test, in Massachusetts, you have to go to the hospital. There's no drive-through. You can't get the test any other place. If you go to the hospital, you are putting others and yourself at further risk. So, if you think you've got it right now, unless you're having severe symptoms, in the state of Massachusetts, they're saying shelter at home and do your best to take care. So, it's yeah, I think you're right. I think the numbers could be much higher. And again, remember this thing, you can be contagious for 10 days before you show any symptoms. That's why this kind of response has to be so immediate and so decisive, because there are people out there who have it, who don't know they have it, who think they don't, and are passing it along. So one can only hope. I will add this, though. The U.S. is considering a universal basic income. This was Andrew Yang's proposal that everybody get
Yeah.
$1,000 a month for life. The U.S. is now considering it on a temporary basis to help people. It's a direct injection of cash to people who are going to need to pay for groceries and other necessities as this gets prolonged. The goal, according to Steve Mnuchin, is to get people at least an immediate injection sometime in the next 1 to 2 weeks of between $1,000 and $2,000. Whether or not that's how it shakes out in Congress is unknown, but it has now been suggested that this is going to be a recurring monthly thing indefinitely. The interesting thing that I found was that oh, and I do need to find her. Dana Perino of Fox News. You can look this up. This is a really interesting one. And one of our Fox News co-anchors called her out on this. She came out talking about how this is a great idea, and she's really for giving money to Americans so that they can survive and they can. And she used Alaska as an example. And Alaska gets every Alaskan gets a significant amount of money as a compensation for their land being used for by oil companies to, basically fund U.S. oil, because Alaska is obviously very oil rich, and every Alaskan gets a considerable amount of money just as a stipend as a result of this. Anyway, she was all for it. And somebody pointed out, wait a minute, weren't you mocking Andrew Yang for making the exact same proposal 6 to 8 weeks ago? And
Yeah.
she was like, I don't remember it. I was like, yeah, you were. You were making fun of Andrew
Of
Yang. She's
course
like, I
you
don't
don't
remember.
remember it.
Yeah. I'm not gonna. And she was like, I'm not gonna get into the politics of it right now. I just think now it's a good idea because it's an emergency. And Andrew Yang has come out and said he should have phrased his UBI not in terms of a health, sorry, not in terms of an economic benefit, but in terms of a health benefit and in terms of managing to keep the U.S. in check should a crisis arise, because that's what's getting people's attention. He framed it wrong.
Right.
Oh, boy. We covered two drugs yesterday that we had said that the news was starting to pick up on, that they said might be effective in dealing with this. President Trump today highlighted both of those drugs as ones that he was asking the FDA to approve and fast track, or actually had said that the FDA had approved. This indicates a stunning lack of awareness as to exactly how the approval process works. There is one benefit to these drugs. They are, in fact, approved. That is true. They are out and available, but they are approved for different things. One of them, chloroquine, is approved for malaria. It is not approved for this usage. That's fine. If it saves lives and you use it off-label, use it off-label. It's been demonstrated to be a safe drug. Unfortunately, there was a white paper on that, which people have been taking very seriously. A white paper which showed just staggering results and said that this drug has been demonstrated by 3 medical studies to be extraordinarily effective in fighting coronavirus. Unfortunately, that is not true. The white paper is, in fact, just a white paper. It's essentially like an op-ed piece. It has no requirements for being accurate in any meaningful way. And all of the numbers that they show, if you look and read the tables, are actually for how effective it is on SARS. SARS shares 80%,
Oh
yeah,
no.
DNA in common with, with this virus. And they admit and say that, yes, it's SARS, but SARS is so similar, it must work. Well, we're pretty similar to a chimp, so I'm pretty sure
Yeah,
that
I was
everything
gonna
that works for a
say.
chimp must work. Oh, good, we're good. The
How
two
close are we
authors of
to
the paper,
bananas again?
yeah, that's let's bring up the banana thing. Great, just bring up the banana thing. Let's just get into a whole argument on evolution, and and you can discuss evolution with the spring breakers. So I think, unfortunately, no, I'm not. I'm not trying to stay away from making jokes about it, but oh my God, I know young people are stupid, but somebody really needs to. Yeah, there's a whole bunch of
This
interviews with
is.
those spring breakers, and they're all like, "Hey,
Oh my.
it's not that
No.
serious." So, yeah, no, it's pretty scary. The BBC is actually covering it more than the U.S., probably because they like how it makes us look, and probably because nobody in the U.S. really wants to cover Americans being quite that fucking.
It also probably makes a good point to their own people.
Yes, actually, that's a really good point too. And hope, and frankly, if it helps the UK, if it helps them keep their own people in check, great. I mean, not great that it's happening, but great that they're highlighting it. So chloroquine, the white paper highlighted appears to highlight stats of how effective it is and claims that it's this effective. They don't actually offer any evidence whatsoever. No evidence that it is that effective, and
Oof.
all of their evidence is actually based on SARS.
That's so
This appears to have
dangerous.
been tested. Yeah, this appears to have been tested in a few cases, and there is some anecdotal evidence that it may have worked. It's all anecdotal. None of it's confirmed. The second author on this isn't even a doctor. He's a lawyer. What a lawyer is doing, authoring a white paper on the efficacy of an antiviral on one of the worst pandemics in modern history, I have no idea, but he is. So we reviewed it. We had one of our uh, correspondents, who is a doctor of biochemistry, look at it, and her conclusion was it is hogwash. It's worthless. It wouldn't pass muster. It had absolutely no peer review. Wouldn't pass muster with anybody who understands how these things work. So chloroquine, we believe at this point there's absolutely no evidence that it works. Donald Trump is now trying to push it as a major solution to this problem and says with any luck it's the silver bullet that will end it. The other one he spoke about that we also covered yesterday was remdesivir. Remdesivir also has the benefit of it's already approved, so it's not necessarily you don't have to wait through and he's sitting there going like, oh, the FDA is fast tracking the approval process. They don't. It's already approved. It's not approved for this use, but if it's out there and if it's approved, it's and they had to clarify this after. I know. Please don't say anything. Can I? By the way, do you have is that spare room still available? You live in Canada, right? I'm just saying.
This
Of
is the
course,
room.
I can't get to Canada right now. You guys closed your borders.
We closed the
Thanks.
border. Sorry.
Um, yeah, remdesivir has had some efficacy, it would appear, in fighting this, but it appears to have only had efficacy in people who are just starting to present with cases symptoms. Once the symptoms start to get to severe, it seems to have no impact, and there hasn't been enough of a study to actually really confirm that that's what it's doing. Most of that's anecdotal as well. It is showing some promise for having some efficacy in helping people in the early stages. That's it. Anyways, the good news is Donald Trump has declared that those two are going to rescue everybody and get us out of this mess. So
Oh,
I
you
do
mean the
think
mess
maybe
that
you
he
should.
said just a week ago was a hoax?
Yeah. Oh, we covered that yesterday too. We brought up his tweet because he both declared that he knows it's a pandemic and that it was a hoax all in the same week. I think
It's a
personally you
hoax
should watch
of
more of his
biblical
time.
proportions.
Yeah. Ford and GM have started talks with the U.S. to repurpose their plants, which are now closed, repurpose them to create ventilators on the assumption that we are going to have a dramatic shortage of them. And we have also found that a number of other closed factories, especially in textiles, are going to be making, they're in negotiations now with the U.S. government to make hospital gowns and masks, start doing that at the behest of the U.S. government. So we will see if that happens. And that is about it, actually. That's
Well, at least we ended on a positive note. Some of the larger corporations are seeing how they can repurpose their factories into something useful while everything is shut down. I mean, it makes sense for
yeah,
them so they can still make money, right? Because they can't make any money while they're shut down. This gives them a way to make money. It gives a way for people to have jobs during this time and a place to work, as well as benefits. That's basically benefits everybody. However,
I
I really do think that they should add hazard pay to whoever they hire to do that at minimum.
I think they should, even if you could assume that there was a way to make these places safe and sanitary conditions, which I don't think you can do. But even if you could,
Ugh.
at a time when the rest of the country is almost in lockdown, and actually there hasn't been any new news on the American president discussing actually on either calling out the National Guard, which there was some talk about yesterday, or putting the U.S. in a federally mandated lockdown. Uh, if you have most of this country locked down and you have people who are required to work under those conditions, they should get some kind of either hazard pay, overtime. I don't know what it is, but at that point, they're no longer just sort of regular employees of any organization.
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. That's unreasonable. Keep in mind that a lot of these workers, especially if you're talking about in grocery stores, are minimum wage workers. These workers are maybe getting a little bit above $7 an hour to put their lives at risk to let you buy toilet paper and to help keep shelves stocked and help older people, younger people, people who are carrying it, people who aren't carrying it, try to keep those places sanitary for the people who are coming in. And dealing with
Yep.
people yelling and screaming at them when they're out of toilet paper.
And we've heard some stories of that. I've experienced some of that. I think everyone who's been to the grocery store in the last 2 or 3 days has seen or witnessed some kind of ugliness. There's been a lot of that out there, and these are people who aren't trained to deal with it. They didn't sign up for this, and they're kind of being on the front lines. We just had there's no toilet paper in my town already. Already, there hasn't been any toilet paper in most states that I'm aware of for a week and a half. At
We've
least in
been
the
a little bit
U.S.
luckier up here. Yeah, we've been a little bit luckier up here. It's we're getting restocked quick enough because we're not getting as many of like the crazy hoarding going on, except at a couple of stores, which are like basically the big box stores that sell in bulk, so like Costco. Um, it's starting to get a little bit worse, but it's still not too bad. Where Ontario specifically is in a state of emergency, but not shut down yet.
Okay, so that's Ontario. Is Canada under a national emergency?
Yeah. We're under a national emergency, but we're not shut down, as far as I'm aware.
Yeah, we're having states shut down. A number of our states have shut down, and I see in the live chat somebody is saying that Pennsylvania as of 8 p.m. tonight, is going to shut down all non-essential businesses. Texas has done that now. So
Mm.
there's a number of it just as a from what the numbers I'm looking at, I haven't counted them all, but it looks like around 10 states have now closed all non-essential businesses. So, but hey, spring break, because this happens all the
Yeah.
time.
Go to
Yeah.
spring
Oh
break
my
and
God.
drink Corona.
Somebody was talking about that. I think he got the beer and the oh my God. If I get Corona, then I'm gonna drink more. And I was like, oh, what? Okay, okay.
Well, I mean, when you sanitize your hand, there's a percentage of alcohol that you need to have, so maybe you can just sanitize, just do it to your insides with a certain amount of alcohol.
Well, yeah. I'm sure if you drink enough
That
Corona, then you
logic
won't get
follows,
Corona.
right?
Yeah. Oh God,
Because
I'm sure some
Corona
of them are
beer
thinking that.
has enough. Corona beer has enough alcohol in it to do that.
Yeah. Oh God. All right. So let's see. Tomorrow's
Be
Friday.
careful, everybody.
Yeah, and I think as usual, I mean there is some hope for optimism, some call for optimism. I think again, if China can do this and so short, this didn't start that long ago in China, and they now have it. It appears under
January, I think,
control.
wasn't it? That people started finding
Uh,
out about it?
well, I think it started a little sooner than that, but it was January that the news started taking it seriously. I think their first cases were
Yeah.
in December, but uh, yeah, I mean that's a pretty rapid amount of time to get it under control, and their military also they have just like we're starting to do. We have sent the USS Comfort to New York. It is going to be supplying another additional 1,000 hospital beds, which is about 5%, I think, if I got that right.
Oh, that makes
An extra
sense.
five
That's
percent
that's good.
Yep, and they also have testing facilities and a bunch of other. I mean, it's a floating hospital, so there's just another
Good.
hospital on its way to New York.
There's a
Yeah,
Yeah, it's good. It's good news that China was able to get this under control in about 3 months, give or take, 3 to 4 months, especially with the size of their population and like the condensed population, and given
yep,
like how much more spread out America is, that should be good news in America if people follow what the professionals are saying. But you need to follow what the
yeah.
professionals are saying for that to be effective.
And I think it was in Argentina where they decided. I think, don't quote me on this. It was a South American country. I still haven't looked it up. That said that you could be arrested and jailed and fined, and I forget the jail time, but it was quite significant for being out without good cause in violation of their lockdown order. I don't know that the U.S. is going to go quite that far, but I don't know we're not either, and I don't know how I feel about it. I'm not as against it as one might think, because if it stops people from going on spring break during this thing, because they're not just endangering themselves. When they get home, they're endangering their family, they're endangering their grandparents, they're endangering everybody around them. I forget the Florida numbers. I think I quoted them a while ago. It's about Florida is currently 384 confirmed cases. So how many that nobody knows that are out there
That's
that
more
have it,
than
and somebody's
Ontario.
going to be there.
That's more than
Yeah.
Ontario is at right now. I think last I looked, Ontario was around 230. We actually had our first death in Ontario the other day, and that was up in Muskoka. For anybody who doesn't know, Ontario is very large width-wise as well as tall. Muskoka is very far up north from like Toronto, the Toronto area, and he was an older gentleman, I think 75 ish. I don't want to get. I'm not reading it verbatim, so it is around that age. And he died because he was in contact with somebody. But it makes me concerned because a lot of that northern area around Muskoka is a lot of people who are retired and a lot of older people who move up there. They are spread out, however, their communities are very much communities. So I'm concerned that there's going to be an outbreak or a larger outbreak up there where people are more spread out. It's harder for them to get help. They are older, and it's going to spread like quickly. But we'll
Yeah.
see.
Well, yeah. Well, that's why these things are so important. People keep forgetting that we're behind because of what you had stated earlier, what we've been talking about, which is there are people who are already
Mhm.
infected who are um, there are people who are already infected who are in these communities who don't know it, and they think they're because everyone they came into contact with didn't seem like they were infected. So no, you don't know. The problem is the incubation rate on this, or incubation time on this, is just too high. All right. Well, I think we're going to wrap this up. Hopefully, we will have Courtney Stewart back for tomorrow. Hopefully, I mean, the good news is, the stock market hasn't plunged greatly. Most of the countries, I think, there's now just going to be sort of a fine tuning of what's going on with these countries. I think significant. The measures are going to get stronger in each country. The lockdowns are going to get stronger, but so many countries are now locking things down. So many states are locking things down. This isn't going to be. Hopefully, we're going to be wrapping up our regular broadcast for a while and go back to just breaking news, which hopefully will be more than once every 3 or 4 days. But we will see. I think we're going to.
I'm hoping that moving quickly and shutting down, like, over prepared me. Maybe like shutting down everything right away for a shorter period of time rather than things getting worse, and being proactive rather than being reactive will hopefully that's the direction a lot of people and a lot of governments are going to take, and hopefully that will be a better decision than being reactive, I think.
I hope so. Again, we had that discussion about sort of the UK's policy, but I think it looks like most of the entire planet has at this point figured out what's going on, with a couple of exceptions. And we will see. So thank you all for joining us. We will, again, probably be seeing you tomorrow, same time. If there's nothing huge new, I don't. Who knows? Maybe we'll even skip it. We'll put an update on our community page. Remember, we are completely Patreon supported. So if you like the show and want to help, please become a Patreon. The link is in the description. The other thing you can do is just hit the join button and join on YouTube, and we would greatly appreciate that. But otherwise,
same bat place, just in time. No.
No. Okay. Yeah, I'll take it.
It was pretty good.
I like it. It was good. It was good. It was very good. It was very good. We're gonna have to add a new show just based on that. We have, people don't understand the way we add shows to. So we've got overtime, in time, stitch in time. So yeah, the way we add shows isn't based on need. It's based on somebody just says a clever title and we're like, oh shit, we need to build a show around that. Yeah, it's we're a slogan run channel.
Bat time. And bat time needs to be about like anything going on with the environment, news about the environment, and like animals and like stuff like that.
Oh God, yeah, because we don't have enough shows already.
And everybody needs to wear a Batman hood.
Well, okay, we can do that. Because actually, I was speaking to our producer earlier today, and one of the things he said was, "Yeah, you guys aren't putting on enough shows. I'd really like to be part of it." That was his complaint. So this will make him feel so much better. All right, folks. Thank you all very much for joining us, and we will see you tomorrow.
Bye.